Welcome to Video Pods. Are you ready? Let's buckle up and dive in.
Okay, so you've got like a ton of notes and articles about destination management plans, and you're ready to really like get to the bottom of it all. Smart move. We're doing a deep dive today into DMPs. We'll cover what they are, why they matter, and how they actually work. I think most people know that a DMP is basically like a roadmap for a destination, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah, what's really interesting about these plans is that they're not just about getting more tourists to a place. It's a lot bigger than that. It's more about like creating a visitor economy that actually benefits everybody. Tourists, residents, businesses, and even the environment.
Yeah, that's so important. It's like trying to make sure everyone has a seat at the table.
Yeah.
But how do you actually get everyone to work together on this? Isn't that like a total logistical nightmare?
You're right. Trying to get everyone on the same page can definitely be tricky. That's why DMPs really depend on a collaborative process. And there are different levels of involvement. So you've got your main team, the steering group, and they're really the ones who are leading this whole thing. Then you've got key stakeholders who are actively like shaping the plan. And then finally, you've got a wider group of consultees, and they're providing input. I like to think of it kind of like an orchestra, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's playing their part to create this like harmonious sound.
Okay, yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But you can't just have everyone like improvising, right?
Mhm.
You need to have some kind of structure, some sheet music to guide the performance.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the 5 key steps of DMP development come in. So first, you need to get everyone together to plan things out. Then you need to gather solid evidence. And this part is like really crucial because you want to make sure all of your decisions are based on facts, not assumptions. Next, you define like what direction you want the destination to go in. Then you highlight specific actions you need to take to achieve your goals. And lastly, you like continuously check on your progress and keep the momentum going.
Got it. So it's not just some document that sits on a shelf and collects dust.
No, not at all. A good DMP is constantly evolving and changing. It has to be flexible enough to adapt to changes in the tourism world.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into this whole evidence-based thing. What kind of research actually goes into building a solid DMP?
Well, it's actually pretty comprehensive. You're looking at everything from places to stay and attractions to heritage, culture, transportation, and even like the buildings and architecture.
So it's like taking inventory of like everything in your destination.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And just like a doctor would order blood tests and x-rays to get a full picture of your health, a DMP needs to like really get into the data. Like, are the accommodations meeting visitor needs? Are your attractions engaging and easy to get to? What's the state of your transportation infrastructure? It's all about figuring out your destination's strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the people? I'd imagine residents and businesses have strong opinions about tourism happening where they live.
You know, they're a really essential part of the whole process. In fact, getting information from visitors and businesses is one of the most important steps in developing a DMP. So it's important to find out what visitors love about your destination, but also what are like their pain points. You also need to know if the local businesses are benefiting from tourism or if they're feeling overwhelmed by it.
So you're not just looking at the physical stuff, you're also looking at like the human element too, the people who experience the destination and make it come to life.
Exactly. And there are a ton of ways to gather all of this information. Surveys, focus groups, stakeholder interviews, online reviews. You can even use those like mystery shopper programs that we were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, I was just reading about a destination that used mystery shoppers to evaluate everything, from how friendly taxi drivers were to how clean the public restrooms were. It's all about experiencing the destination through the eyes of a visitor.
Yeah, it's a great way to find those hidden gems and potential problems. And all of this research goes into that classic SWOT analysis, you know, figuring out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Ah, the good old SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
We talked about that in our deep dive on business strategy a few weeks ago. It's really cool how these concepts keep coming up in different contexts.
I know it's true. It just goes to show how important strategic thinking is, no matter what you're trying to do. And when it comes to a DMP, it's really important to understand the competitive landscape. You know who are your competitors and what are they doing well, what makes your destination unique and offers a truly special experience for visitors.
So you're not just looking inwards at your own destination, you're also looking at what's going on in the rest of the tourism market.
Exactly. You need to stay up to date on new developments, emerging trends, and even potential threats. Like for instance, if a nearby destination invests a lot of money in a new theme park, you have to think about how that might affect the number of visitors coming to your destination.
It's like you're playing chess. You need to be able to anticipate what your opponent's going to do and plan your strategy accordingly.
That's a great way to think about it. The more information you have, the better your decisions will be.
Okay, so we've gathered all this intel, we've analyzed our strengths and weaknesses, and we've figured out who our competition is. So now what?
Now comes the really fun part. We finished understanding our destination, and now it's time to figure out its future.
Like we've gathered all the materials, and now it's time to start building.
Exactly. But remember, a DMP isn't just a business plan for tourism. It needs to align with the bigger picture stuff, both national and local policies. It's about making sure tourism is a positive thing for the community, the economy, and the environment.
So we're talking about sustainable tourism, that buzzword that everyone keeps using. But what does it actually mean when it comes to a DMP?
It means looking at the bigger picture and making sure the destination and everyone involved is doing well in the long term. You need to make sure tourism growth is good for everyone, not just a select few.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. But how do we actually put those big ideas into action?
That's where we have to define specific aims and objectives for the DMP. For example, one aim could be to create jobs in the tourism sector that are actually good jobs. Make sure people are being paid fairly and have opportunities to grow their careers. Another aim might be to protect and improve the natural and cultural heritage of your destination and making sure tourism doesn't destroy those things.
So it's not just about how many tourists you can get to stay overnight and how much money they spend. It's about creating something positive that benefits a lot of people.
That's exactly right. And those aims need to be turned into SMART goals, which means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Oh, I love a good acronym.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying, we want more tourists, a SMART goal might be something like, we want to increase the number of people staying overnight by 10% over the next 3 years by targeting travelers who care about the environment.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. If you set goals that are clear and measurable, you can actually track your progress and make sure your DMP is making a real difference. And don't forget about your destination brand. You know how you present yourself to the world. Does your brand reflect what you stand for and what you want to achieve? Does it speak to the type of tourist you're trying to attract?
Right, the power of branding. It's all about creating a compelling story that captures what your destination is all about. And it should make people want to experience it for themselves.
Exactly. And that story should be woven into your entire DMP. It should guide your strategic direction and all of your actions. Think of it as the thread that ties everything together.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense. But before we move on to actually taking action, I want to go back to this idea of wise growth that you mentioned. It sounds really good, but how do we actually measure what's wise and what's not? Are there specific things we can measure that go beyond just economics?
You're asking some really good questions. Wise growth means finding a balance between economic success and making sure the destination is healthy in the long run.
So it's not just about making as much money as possible.
Nope, not at all. We have to think about how much tourism the destination can handle, the environmental impact of all the tourism activities, and the social and cultural impacts on the people who live there. It's all about making sure tourism makes life better for residents, not worse.
So how do we measure those things that are harder to quantify? Are we talking about surveys for residents, assessments of the environmental impact, things like that?
You're on the right track. It's about coming up with a whole set of indicators that go beyond just economic things, like how much tourists spend and how many hotels are full. We also need to measure things like how healthy the environment is, how happy the community is, and how well we're preserving our cultural heritage.
So it's like a balanced scorecard for the entire destination.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And wise growth is something you need to keep working at. It's about making changes as you go, listening into feedback, and always trying to improve things.
You're not going to get everything perfect right away. It's more about making progress little by little and learning as you go.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important for a DMP to be a living document. You're always reviewing it, evaluating it, and changing it to make sure you're on the right track.
Okay, I'm really starting to get this now.
Right.
But before we move on to the part about taking action, I think we should take a quick break to let all of this sink in. When we come back, we'll talk about how to turn these big plans into real results. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back, and we've got a pretty good grasp on what DMPs are all about now. It's time to get down to business and figure out how to actually make these things work. It's kind of like we've laid the foundation and now we're ready to start building Action Nation.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
We've gathered all the information we need, analyzed everything, and figured out where we want to go. So now we need to turn those plans into actions.
So how do we go from having all these ideas written down to to actually making things happen?
Well, a really good DMP will outline specific things you need to do and who's responsible for doing them. These action plans have to be really clear and easy to understand. Imagine you're a local business owner and you're trying to figure out how your business fits into the DMP. It needs to be something you can actually use.
Right. You don't want people to be so confused that they just give up.
Exactly, and it's not just the responsibility of the DMO. Everyone needs to be involved and work together. That means local authorities, protected area authorities, community groups, businesses, national agencies.
So it's like a huge puzzle, and everyone has a piece to contribute.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you make sure all those pieces actually fit together?
That's where strong leadership comes in. Along with good communication and coordination, the DMO usually plays a big role in all of this. They bring different stakeholders together and make sure everyone is working towards the same goals.
So the DMO is like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everyone is in sync.
Yeah, I like that. And just like a conductor needs to understand the music really well, the DMO needs to understand the destination and all of its challenges and opportunities.
Okay, let's get into the details. What are some actual examples of things that might be included in a DMP?
Oh, there are tons of possibilities. But there are a few common themes. One of them is community engagement. Like, imagine you're a resident living in a place that gets a lot of tourists. You want to have a say in how things are managed, right?
Of course.
A good DMP will have a plan for talking to people in the community, getting their feedback, and addressing any concerns they might have.
It's about making sure tourism benefits the people who actually live there, not just the visitors.
Exactly. Another common thing you'll see is product development. That could be making existing tourism offerings better, or creating brand new ones that showcase what's special about your destination.
Right, so like if your destination is on the coast and has amazing beaches, you might want to invest in making your water sports facilities better, or coming up with new eco-tours.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're a city with a lot of history, you might want to create experiences that really bring that history to life. It's all about finding ways to make your destination stand out.
So it's about highlighting what makes your destination unique and offering experiences that people will actually remember.
That's it. And we can't forget about infrastructure either. If you're expecting more visitors, you need to make sure you can handle them. So that could mean making your transportation system better, upgrading your accommodations, or even investing in renewable energy sources.
So you're making sure visitors have a good experience, but also making sure the destination can handle it in the long run.
Yeah, that's the goal. And of course, no DMP would be complete without a good marketing and branding strategy. You need to figure out how you're going to let people know about your destination, and how are you going to attract the right kind of visitors.
I guess it depends on who you're trying to reach.
Exactly. If you're targeting young people who like adventure, you might use social media and influencers. But if you're targeting families, you might stick with things like travel magazines and brochures. It all comes down to knowing your audience.
It sounds like there's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
How do you keep track of everything and make sure things don't get forgotten?
That's where having good project management skills is helpful. A really good DMP will lay out a clear timeline for everything. It'll tell you what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and who's responsible for doing it.
Oh, so it's like a giant to-do list.
Pretty much. And it's also important to remember that you might not have enough money to do everything right away. You need to figure out what's most important and what will get you the best results quickly.
So you need to think strategically about how you use your resources.
Exactly. And having a well-defined DMP can also help you get more funding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so let's say you're trying to get a grant from the government or a private foundation. They're going to want to see that you have a clear plan in place. You know, one that outlines what your goals are, how you're going to achieve them, and what you expect the results to be. A DMP gives you that framework. It shows that you're serious about tourism and that you've done your homework.
So it's like a business plan for your entire destination.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about getting money, it's also about building credibility and finding partners. A DMP shows people that you're committed to doing things the right way.
It's like a stamp of approval that tells people you're a good investment.
Exactly. Plus, it makes everyone more accountable and transparent. When you have a clear plan with specific goals, it's easier to track your progress and figure out what needs to be improved.
So it's not just about doing things the right way, but also making sure you're doing the right things.
Exactly. A DMP makes sure that tourism development is in line with what the destination and its stakeholders actually want.
You've really painted a clear picture of this action phase. But I'm wondering what kind of challenges people usually face when trying to make their DMPs a reality.
That's a great question. You know, it's rarely a smooth process. One common challenge is getting everyone to agree on things.
You talked about collaboration earlier, but I'm guessing it's not always easy to get everyone on the same page.
You're right. Different people and groups often have different priorities. And sometimes those priorities clash. Like a business owner might want to make as much money as possible, but someone who lives there might be more concerned about keeping the neighborhood the same. Finding a solution that makes everyone happy can be tricky.
So you need to be a good negotiator and find solutions that work for everyone.
Absolutely. Another challenge is actually having the resources to do everything in the DMP. That means money, people, and other things too. Coming up with a good plan is one thing, but making it happen is a whole other story.
I guess that's why it's so important to get funding and find partners.
Definitely. But it's not just about money. You also need to have the right people with the right skills. Do you have a team that can manage big projects, analyze data, and communicate well with everyone involved? Having those skills is really important for making a DMP work.
So you need to invest in your people just like you invest in infrastructure and marketing.
You got it. And then there's always the challenge of staying adaptable. Things in the tourism world are constantly changing, so you need to be able to adjust your DMP.
Like what kind of changes?
Oh, it could be anything, like new travel trend, a global recession, or even a natural disaster. You need to be able to react to those things quickly and effectively, and maybe even change your plans.
So you need to be flexible and think ahead.
That's right. A good DMP isn't set in stone. It's more like a guide that can help you through both good times and bad times.
This is also helpful. I'm starting to see a DMP as more of a journey than just a plan.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And it's a journey that requires you to be resilient, creative, and dedicated to making the destination the best it can be.
Okay, we've talked a lot about taking action. But before we move on to the next stage, I want to bring up something you mentioned earlier. Technology. It seems like technology could really change the way we manage destinations.
Oh, absolutely. Technology is changing the game in so many ways. From how we collect and analyze data, to how we market our destinations, to how we interact with visitors.
Okay, tell me more. How is technology being used to make DMPs better?
Well, first think about collecting and analyzing data. Before technology, it was really hard to figure out things like visitor demographics, spending habits, and travel patterns. It took a long time, and the information wasn't always reliable. But now we can collect tons of data really quickly.
So we're talking about things like website analytics, social media, and even tracking visitor movements using GPS.
Exactly. And we can use all that data to figure out trends, patterns, and insights that can help us make our DMPs better. For example, if we notice that people from a certain country are really interested in ecotourism, we can change our marketing and even the types of tourism products we offer.
So it's like having a magic crystal ball that lets us see into the future of tourism.
In a way, yeah. But it's not just about predicting the future. It's also about dealing with the present. Like, let's say you're managing a destination and there's a big storm coming. You can use real-time data to see what's happening, talk to visitors, and make changes to minimize any disruptions.
So technology lets us be more prepared and react better to challenges.
Exactly. And then think about how technology is changing the way visitors experience things. There are interactive maps that show visitors hidden gems, augmented reality that brings historical places to life, and even chatbots that answer questions instantly.
It's all about creating a good experience for visitors from the moment they start planning their trip.
Absolutely. And all of this can be part of your DMP. You can use technology to personalize the experience, target your marketing, and even manage how many people are visiting certain places.
It sounds like technology is a total game changer for destination management. But are there any downsides? What about privacy or ethical concerns?
That's a really good point. Just like any powerful tool, technology needs to be used responsibly. One concern is data privacy. We need to be open about how we're collecting and using visitor data and make sure we're protecting their privacy.
So we need to find a balance between using data to make the experience better and respecting people's privacy.
Exactly. Another concern is that technology might create a digital divide. Some visitors might have access to a much better experience than others because of technology.
So we need to make sure everyone can benefit from technology, no matter how old they are or how comfortable they are with technology.
Yes. And there's also the risk of relying too much on technology. Technology should make things better, not replace human connection and authentic experiences.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where technology helps but doesn't take over.
Exactly. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. Technology is a tool, and we need to use it strategically to achieve our goals, whether those goals are about sustainability, economic growth, or making the visitor experience better.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation about putting a DMP into action. We've covered so much from community engagement and product development to how technology plays a role and why being flexible is so important. But before we move on to the final stage of the DMP lifecycle, I want to step back for a second and ask you a big picture question. What do you think are the most important qualities of a successful DMP? What makes some DMPs better than others?
That's a great question. I think there are a few key things that are even more important than the technical stuff. First of all, a good DMP needs to be driven by a shared vision. Everyone involved, from the DMO to businesses to residents, needs to agree on what they're trying to achieve and why.
So it's not just about following a plan, it's about everyone having a shared purpose.
Exactly. And that vision needs to be something big, but also realistic. You need to know what your destination is good at and what its limitations are.
So dream big, but stay grounded.
Exactly. Another important thing is adaptability. Like we were talking about before, things in tourism are always changing, so you need to be able to change your DMP as needed.
You have to be flexible and open to new ideas.
Yes. And then there's the human element. A DMP isn't just a document, it's a process that involves people, relationships, and working together.
So good communication and building trust are important.
Absolutely. You need to be able to listen to different opinions, find common ground, and overcome challenges together.
It's about creating a sense of community.
Exactly. And finally, a successful DMP needs to be focused on results. It's not enough to just do a bunch of things you need to see if they're working and make changes if they're not.
So you need to hold yourself accountable and be transparent about your progress.
Yes, those are the things that make a DMP successful. Vision, adaptability, collaboration, and a focus on results. But you know what I think the most important ingredient of all is? Passion.
Passion.
Yeah, passion. You have to really love your destination, believe in it, and want to see it succeed.
Yeah.
If you don't have that passion, it's just a job.
But with passion, it becomes something much bigger than that.
You got it. I think that's what separates the good DMPs from the great ones. It's that passion that makes the whole process exciting and inspires everyone to do their best.
Wow, this has been such an inspiring conversation about putting a DMP into action. We've talked about everything from working with the community and developing new tourism products to the role of technology and why being adaptable is so crucial. But before we wrap things up, I know our listeners were excited to hear about the next stage. How do we measure our progress and keep the DMP going strong? Let's take a quick break to gather our thoughts, and then we'll dive into that final stage. Stay tuned. And we're back for the last part of our deep dive into destination management plans. We've covered a lot of ground, from the planning stages to actually taking action, and even how we can use technology. But there's that saying, what gets measured gets managed. So let's talk about how to track your progress and make sure your DMP is actually doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's a really important point. A DMP isn't something you can just create and then forget about. You need to keep monitoring it and evaluating it.
It's like having a garden. You plant the seeds and take care of the plants. But you also need to make sure they're getting enough water and sunlight, and maybe even do some pruning every now and then.
That's a perfect way to put it. And just like a gardener uses different tools to take care of their plants, destinations use all sorts of methods to keep track of their DMPs.
Okay, so tell me more about those tools.
Well, first, you need to come up with some clear performance indicators. Those are basically metrics that let you measure how well your DMP is working overall. And they also help you see how well the individual actions are being implemented.
So it's like setting targets that you can track over time.
Exactly. And these indicators should cover all aspects of the DMP, from the economic impacts, like how much money tourists are spending and how many jobs are being created, to the social impacts, like how satisfied residents are and how involved the community is.
Right, and we can't forget about the environment either. We need to keep track of things like how much energy and water we're using, how much waste we're producing, and how healthy our ecosystems are.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that tourism isn't harming the environment. And these indicators need to be measurable, so we can actually quantify them and see how they change over time.
So we're not just talking about vague things like improving the visitor experience. We need to have specific goals like increasing visitor satisfaction scores by 10%.
Exactly. The more specific your indicators are, the easier it'll be to see if you're making progress.
Okay, so we got our indicators. Now, how do we actually collect the data? Are we talking about surveys, focus groups, stuff like that?
All of that and more. There are so many ways to get data these days thanks to technology. We can use website analytics to see how visitors are using our website. We can monitor social media to see what people are saying about our destination. We can even use GPS data to see where visitors are going.
That's incredible. But it's not just about collecting all this data.
Yeah.
We need to make sense of it too, right?
Absolutely. Once you've gathered the data, you need to analyze it to find trends, patterns, and insights. You might use special software, create charts and graphs, or even use data visualization tools to tell a story with the data.
So we're turning data into information that we can actually use.
Exactly. And remember that data analysis isn't a one-time thing. You should be looking at your data regularly to spot any problems, find new opportunities, and make changes to your DMP.
So it's all about constantly learning and adapting.
That's right. And you shouldn't keep all this data to yourself. Share it with your stakeholders, get their feedback, and use it to make sure everyone understands what's working and what's not.
It's all about transparency and working together.
Exactly. And don't forget that a DMP is a living document. You should be reviewing it and making updates every few years, maybe every 3 to 5 years. That way, you can make sure it's still relevant and effective.
So it's not just about sticking to the plan no matter what. It's about being willing to change, listen to feedback, and always try to improve.
You got it. And that's what makes a DMP so powerful. It's not just a plan. It's a way to learn and grow. It's about asking the right questions, challenging what you think you know, and being open to new ideas.
It's about being innovative and working together as a destination.
That's it. And that's how you achieve success. Not just by meeting your goals, but also by creating a destination that is thriving, resilient, and loved by both visitors and residents.
Wow, this has been so insightful.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, I have one last question. What advice would you give to a destination that's just starting to create their own DMP? What are the most important things to keep in mind?
That's a great question. I would say don't be afraid to start small. You don't need to have all the answers or a perfect plan right away. The most important thing is to start talking about it, bring people together, and get things moving.
So just take that first step, even if it's a small one.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many resources available to destinations. From government agencies to industry groups to consultants, it's okay to reach out and learn from other people who have done this before.
It's good to know you don't have to do everything on your own.
Right. And one last thing. Remember to celebrate your successes along the way. Creating and implementing a DMP is a lot of work, but it's also really rewarding. So take the time to recognize what you've accomplished, no matter how big or small, and use that to keep you motivated and passionate about your destination.
It's about enjoying the process and celebrating the wins.
Exactly. Remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights with us.
It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into destination management plans. We hope you learned a lot about how a DMP can transform your destination and how it can lead to a brighter future for everyone involved. And remember, if you ever have a ton of research on something you want to explore deeper, you know where to find us. We're always